You gotta stand up and fight. Got to stand up.
In 2009, Jennifer's Body was released to audiences worldwide. Through the years, audiences' growing love for stories about female friendship with sharp dialogue and unique storytelling transformed the horror comedy into a cult classic. So when it was released, why did it fail? The movie opened to a 45% rating on Rotten Tomatoes with overwhelmingly negative audience and critic reviews. This was all due to misleading marketing.
I do feel like obviously it was mismarketed, and I think that's you probably feel a lot of anger about that.
I, had sent him this articulate defense of the film, and here's how it should be marketed. And I said, what specifically are you thinking? And he wrote back, Megan Fox hot.
The movie was pitched and marketed as a generic horror movie starring a popular sex symbol. So when audiences walked out of a satirical movie with a supposed femme fatale revealed to have major insecurities and flaws, they weren't happy. People don't like to be misled. When they see promotional material for a movie, they develop an opinion on the final project, and they expect it to match. When it doesn't, it can be surprising. This is the basic reasoning behind the genius of another completely unrelated children's movie, Hoodwinked.
You've been hoodwinked, baby!
For an upsettingly large amount of reasons, I think this movie's genius. I'm going to go through these reasons one by one, but first we have to start with the history. This movie had a very strange creation. Todd and Corey Edwards, the directors, were basically approached by an investor who had seen one of their previous straight-to-DVD Christmas movies. He asked them if they had any ideas for an animated children's movie about a fairy tale character. This request was following the success of Shrek.
I would love to invest in a computer-animated film that maybe takes a tried-and-true story and puts a spin on it. Do you have anything like that? And we were like, maybe.
Their pitch was Little Red Riding Hood meets crime thriller. It's a tough pitch on paper. It was an independent film with a budget of $8 million. For reference, the first Shrek film had a budget of $60 million, and a Pixar movie that came out the same year, Monsters, Inc., had a budget of $115 million, so already an uphill battle. Hoodwink was completed in 2003 and shown to select test audiences. The reception warranted major reshoots to further develop the characters, improve the choppy animation, and simplify the story structure. 2 years later, the movie was officially released. The animation was still criticized and deemed poor quality even by 2005 standards. It received mixed reviews. The creative blend between fairy tale and mystery and the story structure were praised, but everyone agreed that the animation was horrible. But outside of critic reviews, outside of audience reviews, just going through the elements of this movie, I think there's enough reasons that make it a genius and underappreciated film. First, the appeal. Hoodwinked has a very general appeal and lands in a hard-to-reach area of being equally entertaining for adults and kids. It's fun for adults because it throws in an adult joke every now and then, and has a genuinely engaging story. It's fun for kids because it does something with its child audience that a lot of movies don't do. It trusts them. This movie operates under a non-linear story structure. That can be incredibly confusing for a child to watch. Try watching Memento or Tenet with a 5-year-old. But Hoodwink splits it up very well and doesn't lose its audience along the way. The second reason is the story. As I said, the basic pitch for this movie was Little Red Riding Hood meets crime thriller. This idea was clearly aimed to ride off the trend of the early 2000s of recontextualized, recognizable fairy tale stories.
Harvey and Bob really kind of tapped on some new thing here. It's like an animation movie with a little bit of an edge to it. A classic way told in a classic tale.
The 2000s were a big time for satire because of new internet culture, the rise of parody films, and political polarization leading to a questioning of authority and a rejection of commercialized mainstream ideas, and that's a conversation for another time. But Hoodwink should be praised for not just riding off this trend, but improving it. Another trend in the early 2000s was Disney straight-to-DVD sequels. These were pretty much all seen as soulless cash grabs. I'm basically trying to say that the time was right for the Edwards brothers to make a low-budget, straight-to-DVD cash grab, a norm at the time, but they chose to put the story first. And this is proven by the fact that they put tons of money and 2 years into reshoots when the initial test screenings didn't yield the audience reactions they had hoped for. The third reason is related to this very story structure. Hoodwinked features 4 different perspectives, 2 different timelines, a villain, and an interrogation framing device. Let's break them all down. The movie opens with the age-old story of Little Red Riding Hood coming home to her granny's house only to find a wolf in place of her grandmother.
Who are you?
I'm your grandma.
Your face looks really weird, Granny.
I've been sick,
Your mouth doesn't move when you talk.
Plastic surgery. Grandma's had a little work done. Now come on over here.
The scene divulges into chaos when her grandmother jumps out of the closet tied up and a lumberjack crashes through their window, and we're introduced to the interrogation framing device. This is a useful device because when audiences, especially children, are entering a movie universe, they often need an everyman, a first-day-on-the-job newcomer to lead them through the rules of the world. This can come off as unoriginal or forced, but when no one knows what's going on and the entire movie centers around the mystery aspect, it feels more natural. So the first perspective that we are introduced to is Red's. When she begins to tell her version, we get a book opening. This opening was already getting made fun of in 2005 by Chicken Little.
Oh, no, not the book. How many have seen opening the book before? Close the book. We're not doing that.
Hell, Shrek made fun of it in 2001.
Like that's ever gonna happen.
But you know what? It fits. And this movie, unlike other movies that use the book opening start, uses it throughout the film. The movie is based on storybook characters, and it feels like you're flipping through stories in an anthology fairy tale book, but they all intertwine. It's great. We follow Red on her journey to deliver a goodie basket. On the way, we find out two important plot points. There's a goodie bandit putting companies out of business, and Red wants to go backpacking. We get a fun little musical number, and she runs into the big, not-so-bad wolf.
Afternoon.
He asks her where she's going, she gets creeped out by him, and she's on her way to Granny's. She takes a shortcut and ends up meeting Japeth the singing goat. After his delightfully random musical number, he forcibly offers her a ride in a minecart which derails due to an avalanche. While soaring through the sky to her death, Red has a vision of her grandmother telling her to use her hood, and she uses it to float to safety. She walks into Granny's house and sees the wolf in Granny's clothing. She calls him out, real Granny jumps out of the closet, and then Kirk busts through the window. So the wolf tied up Granny and tried to eat Red, and Kirk broke and entered swinging an axe around. They're guilty.
Just book 'em.
Not so fast, Grizzly. We've got 4 suspects, and that means 4 stories. And if you get people talking long enough, someone will spill the beans.
Beans?
But the story doesn't end here, because the story involves more than just Red. Enter Wolf. So in the first couple of seconds of Wolf's side of the story, he immediately invalidates Red's story.
You saying this guy's a cop?
Worse, he's a reporter.
Oh, what?
And I've got the real story.
He's not a creepy wolf. He's an investigative journalist. He's trying to uncover the identity of the goodie bandit. We see his interaction with Red recontextualized from his point of view, and follow him and his assistant Twitchy as they travel through the forest investigating sheep, walking through sewer pipes, and taking rides in minecarts. Their minecart ride actually times up with Red's. Wolf ends up dressed like Red's grandmother, and after she quickly figures him out, Granny jumps out of the closet. Still don't know how she got there, and Kirk crashes through the window. Still don't know why he did that. Children's movies, and movies in general, can lull in the middle sometimes. But this desire to understand the full story keeps the audience invested throughout all the stories. And the next one is one of the strangest. Kirk is painted as an axe-wielding violent maniac, or possibly an axe-wielding violent savior of Granny and Red.
I would not hurt a butterfly.
Then what's this? A letter opener?
He's neither. He's an aspiring actor and a schnitzel truck driver. His schnitzel van gets robbed blind by the goodie bandit, and then he gets a call from his lizard agent about a role for a woodsman. Kirk is a method actor, so he goes into the forest and chops down a tree. That tree ends up chasing him down the hill, causing him to accidentally crash into Granny Puckett's window. Speaking of Granny Puckett, her story opens up with a scene that we've seen earlier in the film. A split-screen conversation between her and Red on the phone, with Granny knitting before hastily hanging up the phone to watch her program. In the recontextualized version of this scene, we discover that this frail old woman is actually an incredibly active title-winning athlete, and those weren't knitting needles, they were ski poles. And she didn't leave to watch her program, she left to go compete in a skiing competition. At this competition, the notorious Goodie Bandit's workers attempt to murder her by pushing her off a cliff, but she grabs onto a branch and cartoon physics her way back onto the mountain. She sets off some grenades to start an avalanche, literally for fun, and this was the avalanche that was happening while Red, Japeth, Wolf, and Twitchy were in the mines. It's starting to come together. Granny snags the first place trophy and inflates her handy parachute to escape the avalanche. While she's flying, she sees Red about to die in a minecart. She tells her to use her hood, so there's the explanation for that. She flies over to her house, goes down the chimney, and the fan wraps the parachute ropes around her and pushes her into the closet. After Granny tells her side of the story and clears everything up, we get a super dramatic scene of Red walking depressed through the forest because everything she knew about her grandmother was wrong.
Don't look at your granny like that.
I'm sorry. I thought you were Triple G. Or are you the bandit?
Very ironic that the biggest emotional beat in the movie, Red being upset that her assumptions about her grandmother were wrong, is what the entire movie is about. So those are all the protagonist stories. Next up is the villain. The Goodie Bandit, the faceless forest thief, serves as the through line for these 4 stories. When he's unmasked, he's revealed to be a cute, unassuming character that found his way to the center of each of these main characters' misfortunes.
Never trust a bunny.
Never trust a bunny.
Boingo the Bunny. And his plan is hilarious and gut-wrenchingly real. He wants to steal all the goodies to start his own empire. His plan is played for laughs, but his monopolization of the market parallels real-life industry giants.
We've really grown in the past year. Nabbing all the recipes was phase 1. Now phase 2 is adding my own special ingredient to every goodie. It makes my snacks a little more habit-forming. Happy customer!
The destruction of the forest to build headquarters, the annihilation of small businesses to make room for a monopoly, and the creation of addictive additives into unhealthy foods are all too real. Good stories, even in fantasy worlds like this one, are often rooted in some kind of reality, so this checks. One of the scenes that stands out in his evil villain fight scene is the one where he karate kicks a child in the stomach and she starts to cry.
Why don't you go home and cry to your granny?
Obviously she starts to cry. That looked like it hurt. But she tries to stop herself from crying to go against her characterization. Little Red Riding Hood is stereotyped as a naive, meek damsel in distress. Her crying about getting kicked in the stomach would prove to Boingo and herself that she's not a subversion of that stereotype, and she doesn't want to face that. At the point that Boingo is revealed to be the villain, the movie already expects you to know. He's the only character aside from the four main ones that exist in every story. But his reveal still wouldn't work without the clues, which leads me to reason number 4. Organization. Well thought out stories are incredibly rewarding. Part of the reason that we like circular time travel stories or one-season anthology TV shows is because their clear nature proves that the writers took time to craft an airtight story. It's satisfying to see Granny floating for seemingly no reason and then learn in her story that she had a parachute. It's equally satisfying to see an avalanche in multiple stories, then learn that it was caused by one of the characters. It shows that the story went through multiple levels of revisions to ensure maximum clarity, and the level of attention to detail is surprising for a movie with such a small budget. The small budget actually leads me to the 5th reason. Soundtrack. The soundtrack for Hoodwinked is amazing. The mid-2000s existed in this gray area where kids' movies specifically didn't really know where they stood in terms of musicality. The 90s were a definitively musical decade. The Disney Renaissance solidified musical numbers as a crucial piece of the plot and culture of the movies.
So you want music to be information. You want it to develop story or character in some way, so the song will carry its own weight and justify its existence in the film.
Howard said if you can take a song and you can remove it from the script, and the script still makes sense, you haven't done your job properly.
Then, in 1999, Tarzan screwed everything up. That's harsh. Tarzan's not bad, but it did mess with the Disney formula. It was the first movie since The Little Mermaid to feature music but not be a musical. It was almost all non-diegetic music sung by Phil Collins, and it effectively ended the Disney Renaissance. Then, in 2001, Shrek broke all the rules and allowed for a mix of diegetic and non-diegetic music in kids' movies. Fiona can sing at the birds, and more contemporary, less Broadway music like Joan Jett can play in the background of scenes. Fast forward to Hoodwinked. This movie again features both diegetic and non-diegetic music. There are 4 songs that are sung directly by the characters. Great Big World, Be Prepared, The Schnitzel Song, and Top of the Woods. Red herself sings Great Big World during the opening to her story, and it mimics a textbook Disney I Want song. It's kind of setting the audience up to judge where they think the tone of the movie is going, only to pull the rug out from under them. The second diegetic song is Be Prepared, sung by Japheth the Goat.
I've got to find a way around the mountain fast.
Well, you came to the right goat.
Japheth the Goat has unfortunately been cursed by a mountain witch to sing everything he says. This is ridiculous, and it's meant to be ridiculous. I kind of took it as a jab to musical movies where characters sing unnecessarily. This is hammered home by Red's annoyed fourth wall break after Japheth, the cursed singing goat, talks. The same thing goes for the Schnitzel song. This is half Kirk singing to a bunch of weird-looking kids and half recorded voiceover of a female singer, a la Phil Collins. This song, Life Be Prepared, is meant to be ridiculous. Kirk is a caricature. Wolf even seems like a more grounded character and he's a talking animal. So Kirk's over-the-top personality, his dream of acting, and his side job as a schnitzel truck driver all fit with this intentionally random yodeling song. And the final diegetic song is Top of the Woods, sung by Boingo the Bunny, aka the Goody Bandit. The song starts with the lyric, when you're hopping on down the bunny trail, the critters all seem to look down. This stereotyping keeps coming back. Forest residents look down on him because he's a cute small rabbit, which angers him, but it also gives him the perfect alibi, because a cute bunny could never be the ruthless Goody Bandit. The rest of the songs in this movie are non-diegetic, and they're amazing. Todd and Corey Edwards, the directors, sang a number of songs on the soundtrack, including Critters Have Feelings, Tree Critter, The Real G, Ava Deanna, and my personal favorite, Glow. They sang these songs because of budget reasons, but it ended up paying off because it allowed the director to be at the creative helm of the songwriting.
You know, this movie started with 3 guys in an apartment in Pasadena. It was like a couple of us are writing the script in one room. Tony is cutting the entire thing as far as like drawing storyboards. Like Todd and I are drawing storyboards while Tony is scanning and cutting them. And then Todd's composing all the music on a guitar in the kitchen.
Another big name that got on the soundtrack was Ben Folds, the guy that sang the best song on the Over the Hedge soundtrack the following year. He sings the Red is Blue song that plays during Red's post-Granny Extreme Sports Revelation Depression scene, and it's great. This movie's got a couple of scenes where it gets more serious, and they work because of the score. But when it's not being serious, it's achieving the 6th reason. This movie's just funny. Something about the shaky cam interrogation scenes and the one-liners just make it more enjoyable. There are jokes that are funny as a kid,
And what big ears you have.
All the better to hear your many criticisms.
funny as an adult,
We'll never catch her. Taxi! Whoa, that was her. We passed her.
you didn't get as a kid,
The granny pucket you pulling the wool over my eyes?
Haha, hilarious. You come up with that yourself? That's funny.
You're looking pretty tasty.
Why you gotta be like that?
and jokes that are so stupid they're funny.
Hey, look, it's Little Red.
No, it's just some kid.
She's not wearing the red hood.
There she goes.
One of the reasons for enjoying a comedy being that it's funny seems like a granite, but there are plenty of movies that market themselves as comedies that are anything but. But none of the dramatic scenes or the funny scenes in this movie would be possible were it not for reason number 7, the voice cast. The cast for this movie is stacked. Anne Hathaway, Glenn Close, Patrick Warburton, Andy Dick, Jim Belushi, Anthony Anderson, Chaz Palminteri, the voice of SpongeBob Tom Kenny, and countless others who are all giving it their all. A lot of the time, actors will get involved with voice work because it doesn't take a whole lot of effort and it can be done in a relatively short amount of time.
Had a story, they worked hard to figure it out, and it wasn't gender specific. It wasn't a boys cartoon or a girls cartoon or any of those things.
It was a talking dog, you know what I mean?
But sometimes, the cast signs on specifically because they are intrigued by the script. This seems to be the case with Hoodwinked. They had the whole movie cast and voiced by friends, but after the movie was picked up by the Weinstein Company, they brought in bigger name talents to draw people to the movie during its theatrical release. It seems like any actor who signs on to voice an animated character would obviously have to read the script and like it to sign on. But Martin Scorsese voices a fish in Shark Tale, and I seriously doubt he was wowed by that script.
I showed him this puffer fish, and he just fell over laughing.
I tend to have a great deal of hip-hop in my vocabulary.
Raise the reef! Raise the reef!
The story and the soundtrack and the voice acting all make this movie into a masterpiece. But besides the fact that it's entertaining and engaging, it does something that this genre of reimagined fairy tale stories prioritizes, and the 8th reason for this movie's genius. Exploration of bias. Ogres are violent, Maleficent is evil, Snow White is reserved. But in their reimagined stories, Shrek is lonely and craves acceptance, Maleficent is scorned and gentle with Aurora, and Snow White is courageous and defiant. These movies aim to make the audience face the biases they hold about these characters and throw them away, and in a larger way, think about the way that they look at other people. Initially, we judge these characters on the surface. Based on appearances, we assume that Red is a helpless girl.
What's with the handcuffs on a little girl?
The wolf is a scheming creep.
She could just be another victim of a hungry wolf.
Ah, the wolf did it. Talk about profiling.
Granny is a frail old woman.
Little Miss Rosie Cape's making covert deliveries to the goody tycoon. Wolfie tries to eat them both.
And Kirk is an aggressive woodsman.
I would not hurt a butterfly.
Then what's this? A letter opener?
As we get to know them, we figure out that Red is actually incredibly independent. Wolf is an intelligent, investigative journalist, Granny is an extreme sports enthusiast, and Kirk is an aspiring actor. But before the story explores the complexities of their character, we judge them based on stereotypes. Little girls are dependent, grandmothers are weak, strong guys are aggressive, and wolves are creepy. Hoodwinked evolves in a way that forces the audience to understand the dangers of solitary narrators and bias-based justice. When Red alone tells the story, she thinks Wolf is initially creepy.
I'd rather you didn't.
And we believe her, because we have preconceived biases about the big bad wolf. It's only when we hear Wolf's story that we get his depressing backstory and an insight into his career dreams.
For a reporter, you sure have a strange way of doing your job.
What can I say? I was raised by wolves.
It's a movie based on the adage there's 2 sides to every story. Only here, we get treated to 4. We understand the danger of bias-based justice because if the police chief had it his way, characters undeserving of punishment would be in jail based on how the situation looked when the cops walked in. This judgment based on surface appearances goes beyond the universe of the film. Audiences did the same thing with the movie. Now for the elephant in the room, the animation. In my opinion, the bad animation literally doesn't matter. People saw dated animation and remembered poorly animated movies they had seen in the past, and came to the conclusion that because of the animation, this movie must be bad. And sure, every now and then you'll watch a movie with such bad CGI that it kinda takes you out of it for a minute. We're in the era of remastering even less than 10-year-old video games. And yeah, they definitely look better, and I was shocked after seeing Avatar 2 to go home and watch Avatar, a movie that I remember being groundbreaking for its effects at the time, and thinking that the Na'vi looked like video game characters in comparison to the ones in the movie I just watched. It definitely puts into perspective how good the effects are now, and how crazy it is that in 10 years we're going to look back at these effects the same way that we look back at video games and CGI in movies from 2014. But for Hoodwinked, I just don't think the bad effects matter. I've heard a lot of people say this is a nearly perfect movie, but the effects ruin it. And yeah, they're horrible. So horrible that they were even bad by 2005 standards when video games looked like this. A review on the Hoodwinked IMDb from 2006 recognizes the poor animation and completely excuses it. They even say the animation, quote, adds another layer of quirkiness to the flick. I feel the same way about CGI in other kids' movies at this time. The CGI in Shark Boy and Lava Girl and Spy Kids adds to the charm and dreamlike aesthetic of those movies. I'm going to give another praise related to the animation, and it's related to another IMDb review from 2005. It's not what you expected. Many people would be easily turned off by this movie. People saw trailers for the movie, saw the poor animation, and assumed low budget. Which, yeah, so far they're right. But then, they assumed that bad animation and no money meant bad movie. Some people compared it to Valiant, others saw the possibly kitschy plotline of fairy tale characters like you've never seen them before, and thought it would be a half-baked cash grab. But the people that gave it a chance realized that the people that were making it were passionate about telling a refined, unique story, and saw that it took the best parts of the fairy tale reimagining trope, had excellent voice work, and was focused on character exploration. Too many kids' movies reduce its characters to their most general and stereotypical archetypes. Evil stepmother, clumsy dad, dumb sidekick. Hoodwinked challenges itself and its audience by creating characters with depth.
It's such a long journey to make these things. You sort of have to pack the characters with people aspects of people you love.
Every character starts out as a seemingly one-note walking stereotype, and through the exploration of their story, they change into a completely different character.
Don't you think I want more than that?
Of course you do. You're a pucket.
I don't know what that means anymore.
When you put that hood on, you carry on a grand tradition. You were really something up there.
I take after my granny.
Becoming invested in the individual character journeys is a staple of this genre, and getting your audience to become equally invested in the characters as they are in the mystery is an effective way to keep them engaged in the story.
Who was behind it all, So I was completely pulled into the story.
The cards were stacked against this movie. It came out a year after The Incredibles, Shrek 2, and Shark Tale. The Incredibles won the Oscar for Best Animated Feature. Shrek 2 made $935 million worldwide on a $150 million budget, and even Shark Tale, which was criticized for its humor and story even at the time, was the 9th highest grossing film of 2004. That's a lot for Hoodwinked to follow up. But against all odds, with an $8 million budget, Hoodwinked grossed over $110 million worldwide. It was successful, but it wasn't hailed as a new classic. But a lot of the time, cult classics are more intriguing than classics. Classics are cut and dry. Cult classics can be harder to find, or to figure out the quirky reasons to like it, or the surprising reasons as to why it failed to begin with.
I think part of that is because we're being validated now.
Yeah.
People suddenly, the movie has suddenly found its audience.
Each person that enjoys a movie like this enjoys it and remembers it for a different reason, too. This was the first movie that introduced me to nonlinear storytelling, and that's a structure that I still love in movies that I watch today. It introduced me to Ben Folds, who has a great solo career outside of writing songs for kids' movies. And red was the reason I wore skirts over my jeans. These cult classic movies end up remaining in the cultural consciousness because of unique qualities that went unnoticed at the time, but gain appreciation throughout the years. And Hoodwinked serves as a gentle reminder that the first impressions are not always indicative of final opinions. Basically, this movie, Jennifer's Body, any cult classic you can find, can tell you one thing. Don't judge a book by its cover.